You might think you know the story of a simple grandma living out her days quietly. But what if I told you my life holds a darker, far more dangerous tale than anyone could imagine? My name is Amelia. And for years, I lived under the weight of a secret that almost broke me, a secret that has haunted me. And now I'll share it with you. Let me tell you how I became the last survivor of a tragedy that was never supposed to happen. A tragedy that left me standing alone in the ashes of a broken past. But before we dive into that, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss the twist that's coming next. Trust me, this story is going to shake you to your core. I wasn't always this old woman you see today. I wasn't always the one with the calm smile, the soft hands that gently tend to the garden, or the quiet voice that tells stories. My life, much like many others, was built on hardships, moments that shaped me, and lessons learned through pain. I was born in a small town, far away from the bustling cities you might be used to. A place where everyone knew everyone, where the simple things in life meant the most. My parents, both hardworking, never asked for much. My mother, a quiet woman with hands that never stopped moving, taught me the value of patience. My father, a man of few words, but with a stern look that made you listen, taught me the strength of silence and resilience. As a child, I wasn't pampered. I wasn't spoiled. I learned early that life didn't owe me anything, and if I wanted something, I had to work for it. Chores came before play. There was no room for complaints, only for doing what needed to be done. We didn't have much. Our house was small, the roof leaked when it rained, and we lived off what we could grow in our garden. But we made do. I remember the days spent collecting firewood with my siblings, the long evenings spent by the fire, my mother's soft humming as she worked, and my father's steady hands fixing anything that broke, even if it meant using whatever tools we had. We didn't have luxuries, but we had love, respect, and the quiet knowledge that we would always get through whatever life threw at us. It was a hard life, yes, but it was also a good life. It taught me to keep going, even when the world seemed like it was falling apart. And oh, how I kept going. But I also remember the fear. Not the kind you feel from being a child and scared of the dark, but a different kind. The kind of fear that grows in your heart when you realize that something's not right in your own home. I remember my mother's eyes, always soft but shadowed with something I couldn't quite name. And my father. I never understood him completely, but I knew there was something he wasn't telling us. As I grew older, I learned more about the world outside our little house. It wasn't as simple or as kind as the life I had known. People could be cruel, and the world could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. I remember the whispers, quiet, behind closed doors, about the people who moved away or vanished. But no one talked about it openly, not in the town where secrets were buried deep, beneath layers of smiles and how are yous. And then came the man who would change everything. He walked into town like he was sent from heaven itself, tall and charming, with a way about him that made people listen. He was a man of God, a preacher who came to save us all. But even as I saw the light in his eyes, there was something in his smile that unsettled me. He seemed too perfect, too polished for a world that wasn't. And yet, I found myself drawn to him. He made me believe in things I had long forgotten: hope, faith, and the kind of love that could save souls. But now, years later, I see things differently. There's a darkness in that smile, a darkness that I carried with me for far too long. I've lived a long time, and I've learned that everything comes with a cost. Nothing in this world is ever as perfect as it seems. I've learned that people, even those who seem the most righteous, have secrets they would rather keep hidden. And this secret I carry, it's not just mine. It never was. He wasn't just anyone. No, Amelia was the kind of man who commanded respect the moment he entered a room. Tall, well-dressed, with a voice that could fill any space, He had a presence that made people listen. He was a preacher, a leader in the community, someone everyone admired. He was the kind of man who stood in front of his congregation and spoke with such authority, such certainty, that no one could doubt his words. They called him a man of God, and the town believed it. They called us the perfect couple, the kind of family that seemed untouchable. On the outside, we were the embodiment of everything good and pure, always smiling, always at church, always ready to help those in need. No one could see what lay behind our front door. No one could see the darkness that I had learned to hide. I was the dutiful wife, always by his side, always playing my part, always doing what was expected of me. I learned early on that to make it in a marriage like ours, you had to be quiet, obedient, and never ask questions. I kept my mouth shut, my head down, and my hands busy. It wasn't perfect, but it was the life I had chosen. Or at least, it was the life I was made to choose. Every Sunday, we'd sit at the front of the church, him in his suit, holding his Bible like it was the only thing that mattered in the world. I'd sit beside him, smiling at the congregation, making small talk, and pretending that everything was as it seemed. We were the golden couple. I played my part and everyone believed the story, but inside, it was a different story. The more I lived this life, the more I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I began to notice things, small things at first, that didn't add up. His temper, hidden behind a charming smile and eloquent sermons, started to show itself in moments of frustration. The sharp tone in his voice when no one was around, the way he would snap at me over the smallest things, things that no one would ever notice. It started with words, harsh words, sharp enough to make my heart race. And then came the silences, the kind of silence that fills a room with tension, a silence that I began to fear more than any word he could say. His anger wasn't always loud, but it was always there, simmering under the surface. And I just kept my head down. I learned not to speak up, not to ask questions, and certainly not to challenge him. At first, I thought maybe it was just the stress of his work. After all, being a pastor in a small town wasn't easy. But as the months passed, the cracks in the facade started to widen. I began to see the man behind the preacher, and what I saw frightened me. His eyes, those eyes that once felt so comforting, now held something cold, something calculating. There were whispers, too, things I overheard while standing in the kitchen, cleaning dishes. Women in the church, women who looked at him with such adoration in their eyes, began to act strangely around me. They avoided my gaze, seemed uneasy, like they knew something I didn't. I tried to ignore it, but it gnawed at me. I told myself I was just imagining things, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. There were nights when I would hear him talking in his office, his voice low, too low for me to hear what he was saying. And every time I tried to enter, he'd snap at me, telling me to leave, that it was a private conversation. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air in our house was heavy, thick with unspoken words and hidden truths. This wasn't just a family drama. It was a story about uncovering the truth. Stick around to see how it all unravels. I'll never forget the day I found it. I wasn't looking for anything. I never imagined that behind the walls of our home, in the place I had always felt safe, there was something so dark, so twisted, hidden from me. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was tidying up the study, just the usual. Books stacked neatly, papers filed away. But that day something was different. There was a painting on the wall, one we'd had for years. The Last Supper, I thought. It had always hung there, in the same spot, looking so peaceful, almost like it belonged in a sacred space. But that day it caught my eye in a way it never had before. There was something about it, something odd, something out of place. I don't know what made me walk over and touch the frame. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was fate. But when my fingers brushed the edges, It shifted slightly. Just a tiny shift, and that's when I felt it. A faint hollow sound beneath the frame. I ran my fingers along the edges of the frame and pushed harder. The painting tilted, and as it moved, I saw what was hidden behind it. A safe. A metal safe embedded in the wall. My heart stopped. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at it. My hands trembled, my mind racing with disbelief. A safe, hidden right in the heart of our home, right under my nose. My breath caught in my throat. What could possibly be inside it? What was he hiding? I felt my pulse in my ears, thumping harder and faster. The questions came flooding in. What had I missed? What had I not seen? What kind of man, what kind of husband hides a safe in his house? I couldn't move. I wanted to open it, to see what was inside, but I was terrified of what I might find. But I couldn't stop myself. I reached out, my fingers brushing over the cold metal, my heart racing faster with each second. What was behind that door? I tried to open it. The safe had a keypad, and in that moment, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the combination, if I really wanted to face whatever lay beyond it. But my hands were already pressing the numbers, almost without thinking. I tried his birthday. I tried our wedding date. Nothing. The frustration began to build. I stepped back, pacing, trying to collect myself, trying to calm the storm that had erupted inside me. That's when I remembered something. A verse he'd spoken many times during his sermons. A verse from Revelation that always struck me as strange. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. He said it with such conviction. The books, I thought. Could this be it? Could this be the book of life he spoke of? I tried the date he always preached about, 2012, the year the world was supposed to end. The combination clicked. The safe opened with a soft, almost eerie sound, and what I found inside made my blood run cold. Inside the safe, there were small boxes, dozens of them, each one with a name handwritten on the lid. I recognized some of the names, women from the church. I didn't know all of them, but I knew enough to understand what this was. Each box contained something personal, small trinkets, keepsakes, things that once meant something to those women. A lock of hair, a gold earring, a ribbon from a wedding dress, things that were far too intimate, too personal, to be kept in a box like this. And as I opened each one, I felt a cold sweat forming on my neck, a chill creeping down my spine. There were lists inside too, confessions, things no one would ever want to be shared. Secrets, shame, things that had been forced out of these women. And at the end of each list, a phrase written in red, complete submission achieved. My hands shook as I opened another box. And another, each one contained something worse than the last. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight. My thoughts were jumbled. What had he done? What was he doing? I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to walk away. Forget this ever happened. But the evidence was right there in front of me. He had been using his power, his position as a preacher, to manipulate, to control, to break these women down, one by one, turning them into his possessions. The list of names went on, and then I reached one that froze my blood. My own name was written on the lid of a box. I opened it slowly, as if my hands were not my own, as if I couldn't control them anymore. Inside was my mother's wedding ring, the only piece of jewelry my mother had given me before I married him. He took it from me on our wedding night, saying it was inappropriate for a wife to wear such things. And there too was a lock of my hair, the same hair he had cut while I slept, just days after we were married. He'd never asked for my permission, but the worst part? The last sheet of paper, the confession he had made me write. Lies, all lies, the things he accused me of, the things he forced me to admit to. None of them were true. And at the end, the phrase I had seen so many times before, complete submission achieved. I was just one more name on his list. One more woman he had broken. In that moment, everything changed. For years I had lived in the shadow of a man who claimed to be righteous, a man who used God's name as a shield. But now I saw the truth. I had been living a lie. Everything I believed about him, everything I thought I knew, it was all a carefully constructed facade. He was a monster, and now I couldn't go back. I couldn't live in silence anymore. I couldn't ignore what I had just uncovered. Now don't go anywhere. This is where it gets intense. You won't believe what she found. I knew I couldn't go back. The moment I opened that safe and saw the truth, everything changed. I wasn't the same woman anymore. All those years of playing the dutiful wife, the perfect pastor's wife, they were gone. And what had been buried in that safe wasn't just the secrets of a man I thought I loved. It was the key to my freedom. I had to act, and I had to act fast. But even as I made my decision to take control, I was filled with fear. Fear of retaliation. Fear of what he might do if he found out I knew. I had lived in silence for so long, conditioned to keep my head down, to never make waves. And now I was going to do the one thing that terrified me most. I was going to defy him. But what choice did I have? If I didn't do something, I would stay trapped in this life forever. And I knew, deep down, that if I didn't take action soon, I might not have another chance. I couldn't let him keep destroying women's lives, including mine. I spent days just thinking, planning. How do you take down a man like him? A man who had so many people fooled, who wore the mask of a saint so effortlessly. I started with small steps, gathering information. I used the knowledge I had from all those years by his side, the things he didn't realize I noticed. I paid attention to his habits, his routines. He thought he had control, but I was starting to see his patterns. I studied him from the shadows, like a predator observing its prey. Every time he left the house, I made sure to go over his things, his files, his emails. I knew I had to find something that would bring him down, something I could use against him. But I couldn't be too obvious. He was sharp, always watching, always calculating. If I slipped up, it could all be over. One night, I took a risk. I entered his office when he wasn't home, the same office where I'd seen him disappear into so many times. The door was locked, but I had the key now. I knew his routine too well to let anything stop me. I needed to see if there was more to his secrets. I searched, my heart pounding in my chest. I checked the drawers, the file cabinets, even the back of the bookshelves. Then I found it, a hidden journal, his personal thoughts, his confessions. And when I flipped through the pages, I realized this wasn't just a collection of personal ramblings. This was a blueprint of his manipulation, his control over the women in our lives, his plans, his justification. He knew exactly what he was doing. I felt a wave of anger rush over me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have ever let myself live like this? All these years, I had been nothing more than a pawn in his game, and now I had the power to stop him. But how? The journal was damning, but I knew it wouldn't be enough on its own. I needed something more concrete, something that would prove his actions beyond a shadow of a doubt. I needed witnesses, people who knew the truth about him, people he had silenced but who were still alive to tell the story. I started reaching out, carefully, quietly. No one could know what I was planning. I began talking to the women I'd known through the church, those who had left, those who had vanished, those who had been pushed aside. I was careful, gentle, knowing that these women had been broken too. Many of them were afraid to speak, afraid of what he would do. But I showed them the evidence, the pieces of his manipulation that I had gathered. Slowly, one by one, they started to share their stories. I knew the risks. He could destroy me if he found out what I was doing. The man who had controlled me for so long had far more power than I had ever imagined. He had his connections, his influence, and if he knew what I was planning, it could be the end for me. But I couldn't let that fear control me anymore. I had spent my whole life living in the shadows, letting him control me with his words, his threats, his fear. But now I wasn't just the broken woman hiding in the corner. I was a woman who knew her worth, a woman who could finally fight back. I gathered everything I could: witness statements, the journal, the secret files, and the letters. I knew I couldn't go to the authorities just yet. He had too many allies, too many people in his corner. If I went public with this too soon, it would all be swept under the rug. I had to be strategic. I had to plan my next move carefully. And then, one evening, I saw him slip into a meeting with a new woman, one I didn't recognize. She was young, vulnerable, and I could already see the way he was watching her. It was the same look he had given so many others before her. That was the moment I knew what I had to do. He was going to do it again. He was going to break another woman, and this time I wasn't going to let him. I had to move fast. I couldn't wait any longer. I had everything I needed to take him down, but I had to time it right. I had to make sure he wouldn't see it coming. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept. My heart raced every time I saw him. The tension was unbearable. Every time he walked into a room, I felt like he could see right through me, like he knew what I was thinking. But he didn't. I had him exactly where I wanted him. Are you ready to find out what happens next? Trust me, the next part is going to blow your mind. Don't forget to hit the like button if you're still with me. I had spent so long watching him, listening to his lies, waiting for the right moment. And now, the time had come. The man I had once loved, the man who had used and manipulated me for years, had pushed me to the edge. And I was done waiting. I knew what I had to do. I had everything I needed. The journal, the names of his victims, the secrets he had worked so hard to bury. It was time for him to face the truth, but what I wasn't sure of was whether I was doing this for justice or for revenge. Had I become the woman I despised? The one who crossed the line because I felt justified? Or was I simply doing what needed to be done? The weight of that question pressed on my chest, but it didn't matter anymore. The moment was here. I waited until the house was quiet, until the stillness of the night settled over us. He was in his study, his eyes glued to the papers on his desk, oblivious to what was coming. I knew it wouldn't take long. The truth had a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how much he tried to bury it. I took a deep breath, collecting the final pieces I had gathered over the last few weeks. The journal, the files, the women's statements, all of it was ready. The pieces were in place, and all I needed to do was walk through that door and face him. But as I stepped into the room, I hesitated. For the first time in years, I was no longer the meek wife standing in the shadows. I was a woman, a survivor, and that realization shook me to my core. He looked up as I entered, his face lighting up in that same way it always did when he saw me. But there was something different in his eyes now, something that made my heart race. He didn't know what was coming. He didn't know I had seen him for who he really was. "What is it, my dear?" he asked, his voice smooth as always, like nothing was wrong. "You look different. What's on your mind?" I walked toward him, my steps steady, calm. It was a game now, one I knew I was about to win. The fear that had held me for so long began to fade with every step I took. "I know everything," I said, my voice steady, barely a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the tension in the room. His smile faltered, just for a split second. But it was enough. "What are you talking about?" His voice dropped an octave, just enough for me to hear the edge in it. "I know about the safe," I said, my eyes never leaving his. "I know about the women, the lies, the manipulation." For a moment there was silence. He didn't move, didn't blink. It was like time had stopped. His eyes, once filled with control, flickered with something else. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But whatever it was, it didn't last long. He regained his composure, like the mask he wore had slipped just enough for me to see the truth. "You're delusional," he sneered, standing up from his chair. "You're not thinking clearly." I took a step forward, closing the gap between us. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking. He was. I could see it in his eyes. The panic, the realization that the power he'd held over me for so long was slipping away. "No, you're the one who's delusional," I said, my voice stronger now. "You've spent all these years hiding behind your sermons, your God, your respectability. But I see you. I know what you really are." His hand shot out, grabbing for the stack of papers on his desk. "You think you can take me down? You think anyone will believe you?" I didn't flinch. I just stood there, watching as he tried to regain control, knowing that he had already lost. "No one has to believe me," I said. "The truth is in here." I tossed the journal onto his desk, watching as he recoiled at the sight of it. He froze for a second, his gaze flicking to the pages I had so carefully documented. He knew what was coming. He knew that this was the end for him. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" He spat, his voice shaking now. "You think you can just throw me away like some dirty secret?" I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, about the years of silence, the years of fear, about the countless nights I spent wondering when I would finally escape. "No," I said quietly. "I think you've already thrown yourself away." There was a long, tense silence. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling with each breath. And then, his face twisted in anger. "You'll regret this," he warned, his voice low and threatening. "I'll make sure of it." I didn't back down. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The man who had controlled me for so long was nothing now. He was nothing. The truth was out. And now, I had to live with the consequences. As he raged at me, his voice becoming more and more frantic, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of liberation. I had done it. I had finally stood up for myself. I had exposed him for the monster he was. But as the dust settled, I felt the weight of what I had done. There was no going back. What I had just done, it could destroy everything. My reputation, my life, everything I had known. Could I live with the consequences? Would I regret crossing this line? I didn't know yet, but what I did know was this. I had to choose. Freedom or fear, truth or silence. This is the moment you've been waiting for. What happens next will change everything. Let me know what you think in the comments below. The days that followed were quiet. At first there was a strange sense of emptiness, like I was waiting for something to happen, for the world to come crashing down on me. But it didn't. In fact, it was the opposite. For the first time in so many years, I could breathe. I remember waking up that morning, the sun streaming through the window. For the first time, it felt like the light wasn't a reminder of everything I had hidden from, but a sign that I was free. Free of him, free of the lies, free of the fear that had ruled my life for so long. There was no more walking on eggshells. No more pretending. I had taken control, and in doing so, I had found a peace I never thought possible. Of course, it wasn't all easy. There were still questions to answer, still rumors to silence. The town, my community, the people I had known my whole life, had a lot to say about what had happened. And they would always see me as the woman who had dared to speak up, to expose the man they had revered. But in my heart, I knew I had done the right thing. The truth had to come out. No matter how difficult or painful it was the only way to stop the cycle, to keep more women from falling prey to the same darkness I had lived in for so long. The moment I realized I was truly free came one evening when I was walking through the garden, tending to the plants that I had watched grow and change just like me. I remembered when I first planted them, how tiny and fragile they seemed, how they struggled to survive in the harsh soil. But now they were strong. They had bloomed in their own time, just like I had. I had bloomed too. The man I once called my husband was gone, and while that fact should have brought relief, it also brought a sense of finality. I had spent years hoping for change, hoping for him to become the man I once believed he was. But the truth was, he never would have changed. He was always going to be the same. And now it was over. I didn't have to hide anymore. I found that as time passed, my heart slowly healed. I was no longer trapped by the fear of his wrath, the constant anxiety that came with every word he said. I could walk into any room and feel whole, without second-guessing myself, or wondering if I was good enough. I had learned that I was enough, just as I was. But the healing didn't just happen for me. It happened for others too. In the months after everything came to light, I found women reaching out to me, some of them from the church, some from outside. They shared their stories, their struggles, their pain, and as they did, I realized something I had never fully understood before. I wasn't alone. There were others, just like me, who had suffered in silence, who had been manipulated, controlled, and broken by the very people who were supposed to protect them. But now we were all free. We were no longer defined by our pasts, by the pain we had endured. We were defined by our strength, by our courage, and it wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about healing, about finding a way to move forward together. I spent months cleaning up the wreckage, but eventually the wounds began to fade. The scars remained, yes, but they weren't as deep as they had been. And with each passing day, I found myself stepping more and more into the light. I found peace in the smallest of things, tending to my garden, listening to the birds sing, watching the sun set over the horizon. Things I had once taken for granted became precious to me. Now, looking back, I see that everything I went through, the pain, the fear, the silence, wasn't in vain. It led me to where I am today, stronger, wiser, more at peace with myself than I ever thought possible. I've learned that no matter what life throws at you, no matter how dark the path may seem, there is always a way out. Sometimes it takes facing the hardest truths to break free, but once you do, you'll find a peace you never knew existed. This grandma's story is one of survival, strength, and breaking free from darkness. If you've been inspired, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Let them know that no matter what they're going through, there's always hope, always a way out. What you've just heard is more than a story. It's a testament to the strength we all carry, even when we don't realize it. This grandma's journey wasn't just about surviving a difficult past. It was about breaking free and finding the courage to live on her own terms. It's a reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, we have the power to reclaim our lives and create a future filled with peace and strength. If this story touched you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. What part of her journey resonated with you? Have you ever faced a similar challenge? Or do you have thoughts about overcoming adversity? And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this. If you found inspiration in this tale, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let them know that no matter what they're going through, they too can break free. Thank you for being here today. Your journey, just like hers, has the power to inspire others.